investigation. Jay Sekulow, one of the president's attorneys, telling the Wall Street Journal he predicts it should be over soon, saying, quote, "I know we collectively, the lawyers, are looking forward to an expeditious wrapping up of this matter," but he didn't say when he expected that to happen. Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill, joins me now. Jay Sekulow and his team have indicated that they thought this Russia investigation could be over by the end of the year. That seems awfully optimistic as the days tick down in 2017.
Yes, absolutely. We've been hearing this from President Trump's legal team for a while, John, that they expect the probe to be over soon, and that hasn't happened. I think this is part of a larger move, though, to show cooperation with that probe in the legal respects, for the president's team to really put on the appearance of saying, we have clean hands here, we've nothing to hide, and therefore we just hope that this gets to its conclusion as soon as possible. Well,
a lot of observers of these things read the tea leaves. They say that the president's legal team is trying to hasten Robert Mueller's team by suggesting this thing has gone on too long and it ought to be wrapped up quickly. Is that part of the MO here?
I certainly think we could see a turn in that direction soon, because this is really a strategy that suggests that there isn't anything to hide, therefore the end should come soon. Now, if that doesn't happen, I think we could see the president's legal team join his political allies in suggesting that this has become too drawn out, that really there's some political motivation involved here, and so it's part, I think, of the larger strategy.
Well, Robert Mueller has been, he's had some problems within his own team. He's had a lot of public relations, I guess, problems. Would it benefit him to get this thing wrapped up quickly?
I'm not sure that it would. I think that Robert Mueller, before the problems that you just alluded to, John, was certainly well respected on both sides. He has a very impressive record, all of that. And he's looking into serious matters. As far as we know, his stance is simply to get to the bottom of this matter, to see what information is true and what information isn't. I don't think he's looking at it in terms of, can I finish it sooner or later? I think he's just trying to get to a conclusion that he is comfortable with, even while there are all these competing pressures from Democrats as well as Republicans, from critics of the president as well as supporters of the president. Everyone's trying to put their spin on Mueller's thing, and he's trying to drive it through the middle of that.
Well, if Robert Mueller truly is living up to the title of an independent prosecutor, then it would seem like pressure, even from the Trump team, to wrap this thing up quickly is not necessarily going to be effective.
Yes, and I'm sure that Robert Mueller would say that he would withstand pressure from any side. If you're making this argument on the part of the legal team, there is a sense that part of it could perhaps be to try to keep the president calm about this probe, to tell him that the end will be coming soon. But if that doesn't happen, then we don't know how will President Trump and his closest advisors feel if this is going on 2, 3, 4 months from now. That's a very unpredictable consequence.
So you're suggesting that the team is trying to keep the president calm in part by suggesting that this thing is almost at an end?
Yes, I think so. The legal team certainly have tried to suggest that they have no interest, for example, in firing Robert Mueller, that they don't want precipitous action like that. So I think that part of this whole operation is trying to keep the thing in perspective and to say to the president, look, you haven't done anything wrong. This will all be cleared up in a short time. Don't do anything rash that would prolong a probe that we believe is coming close to an end.
The president's allies say that Mueller's investigation has gone far afield of its, designated task, looking into Russia collusion accusations. How do you see it?
This is one of the issues where lawyers, as we all know, can argue endlessly about the meaning of one or two sentences. The letter from the Deputy Attorney General appointing Robert Mueller said that he could look into Russia and related matters. how do you define related? We get back to a Bill Clinton, it depends what the meaning of is kind of position in these things. What is a related matter and what is not? I imagine lawyers could charge a healthy sum to try to get to the answer or get to the bottom of that question.
Niall Stanage is the White House columnist for The Hill. Niall, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, John.
A topless activist keeping Vatican police busy on Christmas Day as she rushed towards the nativity scene in St. Peter's Square. What police say she was after. Plus, it was the year of Harvey Weinstein's downfall as the Me Too movement became a rallying cry for victims of sexual harassment. More of this year's top stories coming up in our Year in Review.
I am totally blind. And Non-24 can make me show up too early or too late.
It happened in a Phoenix apartment complex. When police arrived, they tried to talk to the suspect, but he barricaded himself inside the apartment. Later, police say he started shooting at them.
She heard over 15 gunshots in the apartment complex.
We've never seen anything like this before. Like, all of our neighbors seem really normal and nice, and we've never had a problem with anybody here.
Well, one officer was injured and is hospitalized in stable condition. Police arrested that suspect.
Well, 2017 is almost behind us now, and it's been quite a busy year for news, from President Trump's inauguration to the Me Too movement. Fox News chief news anchor Shepard Smith has a rundown of the year's top stories.
In 2017, a new president took office while powerful men fell as women came forward to say Me Too. Those stories and more dominating the headlines in 2017. The year started with a big change in Washington, the inauguration of President Donald Trump.
The people became the rulers of this nation again.
The next day, millions protested the new president at the women's marches across the country, the biggest single day of demonstrations in American history. The president also confronting North Korea after the test firing of its first intercontinental ballistic missile. The North also testing its most powerful nuclear weapon yet, a hydrogen bomb, and launching a missile that scientists say can hit any point in the United States. In May, President Trump fired the FBI Director James Comey. That led to the appointment of a special counsel, Robert Mueller, to run the investigation into Russia's election meddling and possible collusion with members of Team Trump. The investigation led to the indictment of the former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and the former campaign aide Rick Gates. Also, the former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with the Russian ambassador. He's now cooperating with the special counsel. Charlottesville, Virginia became the scene of deadly demonstrations. A man plowed his car into a crowd of people demonstrating against a white nationalist rally and killed a woman. Americans continue to recover from 3 devastating hurricanes, which hit during the end of the summer. First, Harvey slammed into the U.S. as a Category 4 storm, causing catastrophic damage to Houston and the Texas coast.
We are just beginning the process of responding to this storm.
Next, Irma, one of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes on record. It slammed Florida and the Caribbean with devastating rain. And finally, Hurricane Maria, carving a path of destruction through Puerto Rico, killing dozens of people and wiping out power to the entire island.
Go, come on out.
On October the 1st, O.J. Simpson walked free after spending 9 years behind bars following a botched robbery in Las Vegas. And just hours later in Las Vegas, the deadliest mass shooting in American history. 58 people killed and more than 500 wounded when a gunman fired into a crowded country music festival on the Las Vegas Strip. Still no word on his motive. Just a month later, another deadly mass shooting. 25 people died, including a pregnant woman, during a Sunday church service in Sutherland Springs, Texas. It's the deadliest shooting at a place of worship in American history.
No attack, no act of violence will ever break our spirit or diminish the faith of the American people.
In October, the legendary Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein lost his job and so much more after dozens of women accused him of harassment, assault, and even rape. Democratic lawmakers John Conyers and Al Franken announced their resignations. Then there's Roy Moore and the Alabama Senate race. Women accused him of harassing and assaulting them years ago when they were teenagers. Moore lost the special election to the Democratic opponent, Doug Jones. Finally, the House and Senate passed separate tax bills calling for the largest overhaul of the American tax code in more than 3 decades. Looking ahead to 2018, the midterm elections coming up, the whole country waiting to see if voters will reject or reward President Trump. We're also keeping a close eye on tensions with North Korea and the latest sexual misconduct accusations. Of course, we'll be here for all of it. In New York, I'm Shepard Smith, Fox News.
A topless protester making a scene at the Vatican. Police say the woman, who belongs to a feminist organization, attempted to steal the baby Jesus from the Vatican's nativity scene. This as thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square to hear Pope Francis's Christmas Day message. Well, she was stopped and arrested before she could get away with the little statue.
And a tragic Christmas Eve for a California police officer. The 33-year-old struck and killed by a suspected drunk driver. What we're learning about this officer hero. Plus, a Republican senator leaves the door open for a possible 2020 challenge to President Trump.
It doesn't take rocket science to know that there's going to be an independent challenger and probably one of these never Trump Republicans challenging him as well.
I tried hard to quit smoking, but when we brought our daughter home,
the passenger seat of a patrol car when it was hit by a suspected drunk driver. The 33-year-old joined the California Highway Patrol just last year. He leaves behind a wife and 3 children. The officer in the driver's seat of the patrol car suffered minor injuries in the crash. The suspect was reportedly speeding and under the influence of alcohol.
And a frightening scene in Alexandria, Virginia, after a massive fire breaks out at an antique store on Christmas night. Although fire crews arrived quickly, heavy flames and high heat forced them to pull back.
Units arrived on scene within 2 minutes of dispatch and identified a well-developed fire on the second floor of the structure. There was concern for collapse. Units withdrew from the structure, and shortly thereafter we did have collapse of one backside wall of the structure, and we continue to have other multiple minor collapses on the interior.
Well, as you can imagine, the fire destroyed the antique store. The cause of the fire under investigation.
Senator Jeff Flake with a warning for President Trump. The Arizona Republican suggesting the president's words and actions are leaving him open to a primary challenge. And Flake is not ruling out being that challenger after announcing he will not seek re-election to the Senate next year.
I do wonder, and I do worry, that in the future we'll be faced with maybe President Trump running for re-election on one side, drilling down hard on a diminishing base, and on the other side you might have somebody like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren on the far left of the Democratic Party. That leaves a huge swath of voters in the middle that may be looking for something else.
But you are open to running for president in 2020?
I don't rule anything out, but it's not in my plans.
Well, let's bring in our panel. Lawrence Jones is a conservative commentator and radio host of The Lawrence Jones Show. Jim Kessler is a former legislative and policy director to Chuck Schumer and senior vice president and a co-founder of Third Way. Nice to see you both.
Nice to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I want to start with you, Lawrence. What do you make of Senator Flake's response? You know, we have heard this kind of a response from politicians before. Do you think he'll run, and do you think he'd have a chance?
I'm like, go for it, dude. You can't even win a primary in your own state. That's why you're not running for office right now. You think you can run for president of the United States? Look, if he decides to primary Donald Trump, this is a guy that votes for Democrats. This is a guy that sends money to Democrats, votes on legislations that Democrats propose. So, you know what, go for it, dude. You can't even win your own state.
Okay, ouch. Well, let's go over to you, Jim. You know, Senator Flake says that President Trump is certain to face an independent challenger, if not one from within his own party. What do you think?
I think he will. Look, if you have an approval rating that can freeze water, you're going to get a primary opponent. And I think there's almost a certainty that there'll be an independent running against him as well. You know, I don't know if Flake could beat Donald Trump. I doubt he could, but he can do damage, or somebody else could do damage in a primary, and an independent candidate can do damage in a primary as well. The president's unpopular, he's weak, he's scandal-tarred, so you know, 3 years is a long time, but if he doesn't solve those problems, people are going to be running against him in spades.
Lawrence, Senator Flake says that Republicans really need to marginalize sort of the ultra-nationalist movement within the party, what people know as the Steve Bannon movement. What are your thoughts?
Look, we're going to always have a debate within the movement of conservatism because we don't believe in groupthink like the Democrats. So there's always going to be this infighting on ideas. But this is a big tent party. And the voters selected Donald Trump to be the president. That's just the bottom line. So either these people are going to challenge Donald Trump on policies that they disagree with and make those policies better. Like, for example, I disagreed with a lot of the ways they did the tax proposal. I think there was a lot of good things, but I wanted the individual a little bit more. I still got something out of it, but I wasn't just trying to be anti-Trump. I wanted the bill to be better. And what we've seen for people like Jeff Flake is that he's just anti-Trump. At least here recently he was, when he didn't get what he wanted from the president.
Well, Jim, let's go over to you. You know, he just mentioned tax reform and that some people like it, some people don't. There are things that people say could have been done better. Republicans really are relying on those tax cuts to help them in the midterms. So let's take a look at what could happen in the midterms. If the Republicans were to lose one or both houses, how will that be a game changer for President Trump in 2020?
Well, it means he'll have to work in a bipartisan fashion on everything. Really, this is the way he should have started out because he had that opportunity before. But you know, one of the things that's happening in the, you know, what we've seen in 2017 is Democrats have been nominating moderates in these contested primaries. You know, Ralph Northam was the moderate, and he beat Tom Perriello, the liberal, in the Virginia primary, and then won the governor's race. And Doug Jones was a moderate as well. So if you see that Democrats are nominating moderates in these contested places, it's going to be real problems for Trump in 2018 and in 2020. I mean, if Democrats take a broad path, and it looks like that's what they're doing, you know, these elections could turn dramatically. And the president's agenda would either be scuttled or he'd have to radically change it.
Lawrence, I want to get your take on the midterms specifically. Actually, it sounds like you wanted to go ahead and respond, so go ahead.
So the last thing you want is Donald Trump on the ground with the American people before he goes into a general election. We know Donald Trump has the ability, even when the conservative like me didn't think he could do it, to energize the base. And so if you give him a primary challenger, he's going to be fired up going into the general. And we know what happened the last time when you put Donald Trump in a primary. He has the heart of the American people. And when you're talking about some of those moderates, remember, Donald Trump got a lot of those voters. When you're talking about Ohio, those voters that voted for Barack Obama end up switching to Donald Trump. So he's not that type of president that is so deep rooted in his ideology that he can't be reasonable with the American people.
Well,
Jim, go ahead.
He better show some flexibility there because he just had two major drubbings. Virginia, the Democrat won that race by 10 points. A Democrat hasn't won Virginia by 10 points since the 1980s. And of course, there was the Alabama Senate race. I know that is a bit special, but you know, Democrats are normally not even competitive there. But you know, Lawrence, that big tent that you were talking about with the Republican Party, that tent seems to be shrinking day by day by day. There's a civil war within the Republican Party. It's not about groupthink. It's about whether you're going to be, you know, invite at least a little bit of diversity within the party. The party doesn't seem to be doing that.
That's the debate.
And you know, and Democrats, look, Democrats need to take a broad path. The Democratic Party has its own problems and its own argument inside. But if you look at what's happening in the primaries, Democrats have been picking the moderate candidates. And if that happens in 2018 and in 2020, you know, this country's going to turn again. It's going to pick a different party for the White House and for Congress.
Lawrence, you want to give a quick 10-second response?
Look, the Democratic Party is in debt. They believe in selecting candidates and not letting the American people select it. We saw that with Bernie Sanders as well as Hillary Clinton in that race, that the people in the leadership chose their nominee, not the people. And so what we see on the right is that we're going to let our people decide who they want to serve in elected office.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Lawrence Jones, Jim Kessler, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
One of the big events of 2017, Hurricane Maria. It devastated Puerto Rico, but 30% of the island's residents still do not have power. So what's taking so long? Stacey Delicat of our New York affiliate WNYW explains.
Christmas in Puerto Rico was not as bright as many would have hoped. At least 30% of the island's power grid is yet to be restored, so tens of thousands continue to live in the dark, and some still don't have clean water.
You don't have enough water here, and the water that comes out of the faucet is dirty.
This woman, Catalina, lives in the Jardines del Caribe neighborhood. In this video, filmed earlier this month, she's talking to New Yorker Jamie Harper, who's just returned from her third humanitarian mission to the island.
Pretty much all the towns that I've been to, there's devastation at some place, like a devastation that you say, wow.
Harper, whose mother and brothers live in Puerto Rico, has driven the island in a rental car, hand-delivering care packages to hundreds of residents living in remote areas who have seen little government help since the storm struck 3 months ago.
For the people that are there, they do feel forgotten. There's a lot of areas that they're like, oh, you're the first one here. I'm like, how is it possible?
She's also made it her mission to feed as many homeless animals as she can.
You were hungry.
Harper will make her fourth trip to the island later this week. She has a GoFundMe page for forgotten Americans in Puerto Rico, but pays for most of the supplies out of her own pocket. Amidst the devastation, she says, she has also seen an amazing resilience among the people of the island, especially around Christmas.
From chaos, something gorgeous came out, and it's the power and the willingness of the Puerto Rican people. Like, they're strong. They want to have a good time regardless.
Jamie will pack up all of these bags and more to head back down to Puerto Rico on Thursday, and then she plans to return again in January. She's also in the process of forming an official nonprofit organization.
Still a mess on that island. That was Stacey Delicat reporting. As for the recovery efforts, 5% of the people do not have running water, 12% of gas stations are still closed, and 12% of cell phone towers are still down.
A football star salutes a home state hero. We'll tell you about wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald's touching Christmas tribute. Plus, North Korea calls the U.S. claim that it was behind a massive cyber attack baseless. What the rogue nation is now calling on Washington.
It can detect a threat using AI and respond 60 times faster. It lets you know where your data lives down to the very server. It keeps your...
Arizona Cardinals wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald writing a letter in Sports Illustrated offering encouragement and prayers as Senator McCain fights a tough battle with brain cancer. Fitzgerald writes, "I'll wish him a Merry Christmas today, and I pray he lives another 20 years. I know this. As soon as my boys are of age, I'll tell them stories about the quality of the man I've gotten to know. I'll tell them Senator John McCain will be revered and respected for as long as the United States of America has a place in this world, and his legacy will outlive us all."
A new demand from North Korea, with the rogue nation now challenging the U.S. his claim that Kim Jong-un's government was behind WannaCry. If you remember, that's the cyber attack that infected hundreds of thousands of computers worldwide. Retired four-star General Admiral Robert Natter was commander of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet. He was also commander-in-chief of NATO's North Atlantic Command. Nice to see you, Admiral Natter.
Good morning.
You know, the U.S. does not make those claims lightly when it says that a country conducted a cyber attack. What do you make of Kim Jong-un's demand that the U.S. back up the claim?
Well, not only Kim Jong-un, but his father has a long history of denying just about everything. Certainly, he was behind the Sony attack. This current attack, the WannaCry, has been confirmed that North Korea was behind it by multiple countries and independent corporations. It is pretty obvious in a record of Kim Jong-un's activities.
You know, you used to be commander of 7th Fleet, which for people who don't know what that means, you were basically in charge of war planning in terms of potential war on the Korean Peninsula. So I want to get your unique perspective on where we are right now. How far do you think the U.S. really is willing to go in terms of stopping Kim Jong-un?
Well, we're going the distance, hopefully, with negotiations, because that really has to be the solution to this. Anything short of a negotiated settlement is folly. We certainly have to be prepared for combat operations, but those kinds of operations against North Korea would be devastating to both North and South Korea, and certainly would have a huge impact on American military personnel.
Okay. I want to also get your perspective as a former naval officer on some trouble that we're seeing in the North Sea. The British Royal Navy had to shadow a Russian warship because it passed near UK territorial waters over Christmas. What do you make of this? Russia just exercising its freedom of navigation? I mean, we do this, right?
We certainly do, and the Russians have a long history of doing this. We have been very deliberate, as had the Russians up to this point, about giving national waters good clearance so that there's no mistaking warships' entry into the waters of a nation that is independent. We've seen a huge acceleration of these kinds of operations for Russia, both with their air operations, their submarine operations, and their surface ship operations against NATO countries, including the United States.
I want to know how concerned you are about Russia and its increasing its blue water operations, as you just mentioned. You know, Russia just sealed a deal with Syria to make the base in Tartus permanent, which is its base in the Mediterranean. We know Russia took Crimea for the purpose of having a warm water port. We're seeing more of these blue water worldwide operations. Are you concerned about what Russia's doing in terms of naval power?
Well, I'm concerned about it. It's obvious that Putin has decided to revert to the Cold War activities of the old Soviet Navy and their Soviet military. My big concern is not necessarily what the Russians are doing, but what the United States is not doing. In the face of these kinds of operations by the Russians, the North Korean in-your-face kinds of operations, and the Chinese accelerated
We're coming up against a hard break here, sir, but thank you so much, Admiral Robert Natter. Nice to see you, sir.
You're quite welcome.
Right back.
Thank you.
You might take something for your heart or joints, but do you take something for your brain? With an ingredient originally found in jellyfish.
Since 2011 this year, both online and in stores. Anita Vogel joins me now from Los Angeles. Let's talk, Anita, about why people are so willing to spend money this year.
Well, hi there, John. Good morning. The experts say shoppers felt a new sense of confidence about the economy this year. That plus the fact that Christmas fell on a Monday, giving shoppers the full weekend to open their wallets. And they did so online and in the brick and mortar stores at places like Macy's and Kohl's and Toys R Us. The cash registers there were ringing in more than just holiday cheer. And researchers expect the shopping to continue right through the end of the year.
Check out Amazon, obviously. Walmart is going to be doing some discounts as well. And if you're willing to wait until the 29th, Amazon has their digital day, which is like another buzzworthy day to get lots of discounts for people who are Prime members.
And it's not just Amazon, though. Many of the big chain stores like Walmart and Macy's, they know some people shop only after Christmas, and they say the sales this year will be huge. John.
And record sales this year over last year, Anita?
That's right. The numbers show people spent a lot more money this year than they have in previous years. According to the National Retail Foundation, 7 years ago, sales were at $528 billion. In 2017, the estimate for this holiday season is $682 billion. A spokesperson from MasterCard says overall, this year was a big win for retail. And John, just think, it's not over yet. You know, those bargain shoppers are going to be out this week, and they'll be hitting those sales all the way through the end of the year.
Yeah, so more cash registers to come. Anita Vogel from Los Angeles.
They'll be ringing.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
New York City's Empire State Building showing off a festive display on Christmas Day with red and green lights and a candy cane antenna. The tower even featuring a Music to Light show, which was synced to Gwen Stefani's You Make It Feel Like Christmas. The new LED light system at the iconic skyscraper can display 16 million colors and a whole new array of digital effects.
Wow. Well, President Trump is looking ahead to 2018. The issue he believes could actually cause bipartisanship to break out all over. What it is, and is he right? We'll go in depth.
It's time for Sleep Number's lowest prices of the season on the only bed that adjusts.
And we start with a working vacation at the Winter White House in Florida as President Trump spends the week in Mar-a-Lago for the holidays while looking ahead to the challenges 2018 will bring. Welcome to Happening Now, and it is a Tuesday morning, I believe. Good morning, I'm John Scott.
And I'm Leah Gabriel. Nice to be with you, John, and nice to see all of you. Well, the president says he will still be working hard over the holidays as he touts the accomplishments of his first year in office. He sounds hopeful that the next year will bring more bipartisanship.
Rich Edson live in West Palm Beach, Florida now, traveling with the president. So what is on Mr. Trump's schedule today, Rich?
Now, good morning, John and Leah. And it was a little cloudy earlier today. The sun has come out, so the president has headed over to the Trump International Golf Course, where he's playing golf today with a couple of PGA Tour vets and a senator. He's got with him today Bryson DeChambeau, former PGA golfer Dana Quigley, and Senator David Perdue, the Republican from Georgia. It was a quiet Christmas for the president, at least publicly. Yesterday, outside a couple of tweets, he sent a Christmas message along from the First Lady and himself, wishing everybody a happy holiday. We also heard from an administration official that the president provided dinner to the Secret Service, the military officials, and local law enforcement who are protecting him and his family at Mar-a-Lago, John.
So the president is looking ahead to next month's fights?
Yeah, the White House is insisting this is also a working vacation. Yesterday, he was briefed on a terrorist attack in Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. Also, the White House Legislative Director Mark Short is saying that they've now scheduled a meeting for the first weekend in January at Camp David with House Speaker Paul Ryan and the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Atop that legislative agenda, they're expected to discuss an infrastructure proposal that the White House is going to roll out. Also, a tweet this morning on health care as legislative agendas go. The president tweeting, quote, based on the fact that the very unfair and unpopular individual mandate has been terminated as part of our tax cut bill, which essentially repeals over time Obamacare, the Democrats and Republicans will eventually come together and develop a great new health care plan. So the president telegraphing that he wants to work with Democrats on health care. The first approach that happened a few months ago, Republicans tried to replace Obamacare. Only a Republican effort in a way that there were really only Republicans that were only going to vote for it. In that case, they didn't get enough of their own members to go along with it, and that effort died in the Senate. Democrats say they want to save Obamacare, change Obamacare, improve Obamacare. Republicans are looking at this idea that they would replace it. Now, the president did mention the individual mandate. That's the portion of Obamacare that requires nearly every American to purchase or have health insurance. Now that is done, there are a number of analysts who say that portion of Obamacare could very well unravel, but there's still a very large part of the law that remains in place, including the expansion of Medicaid. All of that will be up for grabs as lawmakers try to figure out what to do with the future of health care. There's also disaster assistance relief from the hurricanes that we saw within the last couple of months. There's immigration that the president would like Congress to work on. Health care, budgeting. So it's a robust agenda for the early part of next year, which, by the way, is a midterm election year.
Right.
John and Leah,
and because it's an election year, everybody says nothing is going to get done. We'll see about that. Thanks very much. All right, President Trump set to hit the ground running in 2018, though. He hopes to make good on another campaign promise after delivering on tax reform.
I think you'll see the president roll out infrastructure plan in January, and the president has already invited Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan to Camp David the first weekend in January to make sure we're all on the same page about what our priorities are for 2018.
So let's talk about those priorities. Joining us now, Kevin McCullough, conservative syndicated radio host with Salem Media. Monique Presley is an attorney and Democratic commentator. Thanks both of you for being here on this day after Christmas. I guess whether this administration has achieved a great deal in 2017 might depend on which side of the aisle you're on. Monique, give us your assessment from a Democrat's perspective.
I think from a Democrat's perspective and from an honest Republican's perspective, this past year has gotten a D- to an F in terms of actually accomplishing the very robust agenda that the president promised during the campaign and once he was elected. We saw a GOP-led Congress and a Republican president not seem to be able to get their acts together enough to push forward an agenda when they were in the majority. So sure, there's a new Supreme Court justice, but even when you look at that, the speaker had to suspend rules, change rules, refuse to have a vote for almost a year in order to wait for this president to get in office to get that done. So that's not really a Trump win. That win goes to McConnell. CBS
News is not generally favorable toward this president, Kevin, but here's a line from one of their recent articles. Despite his low popularity and his drama-filled White House, Mr. Trump has done what many of his predecessors haven't. He's fulfilled many campaign promises. Monique says he hasn't, but CBS says he did. Give us your assessment.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm not sure that's what Monique said, but let me just address what that issue brings up, and that is that in politics, the key is to keep your word. So on nearly every agenda item that you can point to, he's either fulfilled the promise or he's made great progress towards it. Now, the Democrats may not like the promises that he's made, but you cannot say he didn't get tax reform done. You cannot say he didn't repeal the individual mandate, which will be the silver thread that undoes all of Obamacare. You can't say he didn't get the border wall process started. You can't say that he didn't get a Supreme Court justice in place, 12 circuit court judges that look just like him, and about 70-plus judges. He's ahead of Obama's pace at replacing judges at this point in his presidency. In fact, at the end of year one, he's closing in on where Obama was at the end of year two. You're talking about 80-something accomplishments, 11 legacy rollbacks from Obama, and 800 regulations roll back. This has been a very busy White House. Again, it may not be something that Monique's side of the aisle likes, but you can't say they haven't been active.
They have repealed the individual mandate, Monique, and
that's not the same. I'm sorry to interrupt, John. That's not the same as repealing Obamacare, and we know that that was the promise. Let me add a new letter because it seems that E for effort is supposed to count. So they've really tried to do some things. They're starting to move toward the border wall. I don't care about them actually building a border wall. It makes no sense. It costs too much money. It's not going to work, but they promised it and they didn't do it. They haven't repealed Obamacare. They passed a tax measure, yes, they did, that is going to help the top nth percent of the American public. So I can't imagine that real Trump supporters would be excited about that once they figure out what's actually going on. Yes, they get a grade A, an A+ even, for trying to reverse every single thing the past president did. That, I think, is their real agenda. Doesn't matter that it doesn't help the American public. Just the fact that they're getting that done seems to be enough.
But Kevin, when you look at the economic growth numbers, and when you look at the stock market, I mean, not everybody's in the stock market, but it's a pretty good barometer of how the business climate goes in this country.
It's a very good barometer, and we definitely want to roll back every single thing Barack Obama did in terms of job creation. We don't want 1.5% GDP growth. We want 4%. And now, in quarters 3 and 4, we've been north of 3 without the tax reform pass. Now the tax reform has passed. Quarters 1 through 4 of year 2 should be much, much better. And Monique, I know that your side doesn't like the objectives, but you cannot say that in at least commissioning the start of the wall and the different plans that now the Customs and Borders Enforcement have to approve and test, and Congress not having yet approved the money, you can't say that they haven't been active on it. So again, some promises have been completely fulfilled in year 1. Some are in process, but all of them have made progress.
The president also says he wants to get an infrastructure bill passed, and that would seem to be the one that both sides are going to be in favor of. That might be his easiest lift yet. We'll see.
Perhaps so. But where the economy is concerned, I just have two things to say. Thanks, Obama, and Merry Christmas.
All right.
Didn't happen until Q3, which had nothing to do with Obama.
Okay.
Monique Presley and Kevin McCullough. Thanks, both of you.
Thank you.
Everyone's okay after a plane slides off a Boston runway. Take a look at what it looked like at Logan International Airport last night. A JetBlue flight was coming in from Savannah, Georgia, when icy conditions caused it to skid and slide right off the taxiway. Firefighters helped passengers off the jet, and no one was injured. The bad weather also briefly closed some runways yesterday there. And speaking of ice and snow, it was a white Christmas for millions in the Northeast and the Midwest. Take a look. Folks waking up to scenes like what we're about to show you when we pull up this video across the country. Snow in places like Seattle on Christmas Day. Snow's rare there. So what do early forecasts look like for New Year's Eve? Well, let's ask meteorologist Adam Klotz, who's live in the Fox Extreme Weather Center. Adam?
Hey there, snow in Seattle, you mentioned that's the first time in a decade. Mostly that snow's kind of winding down at this point. The next big story for the next couple of days, certainly today, frigid cold temperatures. This is the current wind chill, and I'm showing you what's happening up in Canada because it's all kind of plunging down into the continental United States. But these are negative numbers. So that 49, that's a negative 49 degrees below zero. That is all settling down into the states. This is the wind chill again. It's 33 degrees below zero in Fargo, or feels that way with the wind chill. 14 degrees below zero in Chicago, 10 degrees below zero in Kansas City. The actual temperatures, I'm going to drill in here on the northern plain states. These are real temperatures. This is no longer the wind chill. We are still sitting across this entire region down into the negatives. So -3 degrees in Omaha, -8 degrees in Sioux City. You run farther north and you're getting some of those spots still in the -10 to 20 to 25 degrees. So just absolutely frigid in some of these areas. Again, you add that wind and it does feel even colder. This once again is the wind chill where you're falling back down into spots feeling like you're 30 to 40 degrees below zero here at this point. On the entire day, the wind's going to be there, but the actual high temperatures doesn't get all that warm. High of only 1 degree in Minneapolis today, 12 in Chicago, 15 degrees in Cleveland. This cold air, unfortunately, is going to linger in the northern half of the country all the way through this week. So as you begin to think about those New Year's Eve plans, what about a winter storm? You kind of led to me with that. It's still a little ways away, but here's a system we're paying attention to. Here's your future radar. It's taking you all the way from Monday into Thursday, staying clear for a while. But as we get into the weekend, we get this line of wintry weather that again is going to be firing up. This is stretching from the southeast all the way up into New England. There you are on Sunday. That's New Year's Eve, running into New Year's Day. Unfortunately, this is a system we're going to be paying attention to. Still a little ways off. It may speed up, it may slow down, but that's when we're going to be targeting that could be causing some trouble on New Year's Eve.
All right, Adam Klotz, thank you.
So the question, candidate Donald Trump bested 17 other Republicans to win the primary and ultimately the presidency. Could President Trump face a Republican challenger in 2020? What Arizona Senator Jeff Flake is saying and not saying about any presidential plans. Plus, a Christmas Day tragedy as a woman and 2 children are shot and killed in Arizona. How police finally arrested a suspect.
We went around the block to try from the other side, and every entrance was just blocked off by tons of cop cars, and then we saw some police holding guns and rifles.
This is where life